Hello viewers, thank you for joining me, and welcome back for my review of the third season of Golden Kamuy. I mentioned in my review for Season 2 that I'd actually expected that review to be pretty short, and if you didn't see it, it ended up being almost 10 minutes longer than the first. A marathon of all the ways the backstory reveals and character development in Season 2 gave me a new appreciation for nearly every participant in this treasure hunt. You can expect this review to be pretty similar. There are a couple big plot moments, but Season 3 is another one where the real meat of these 12 episodes is the time spent fleshing out these characters and what motivates them. Season 3 takes us to Karafuto, a strip of land which, at the time, had been split in half. Japan owned the southern half, Russia had the north. I'd say the main focus of this season is giving the audience a better picture of Wilk, a Sherpa's father. As they travel through Karafuto, Kiraranke finally gives us some answers, in the hope that something will jog a Sherpa's memory, in regards to some clue he must have left her to decode the tattoos. And I know I said in the last review that I was worried about his reliability as a narrator if he was going to be the voice behind these flashbacks. But I only doubted that trustworthiness a few times when the backstory segments were actually happening. So, to finally put some of the puzzle pieces together, Wilk was Ainu. Half, at least. His father was Polish, his mother came from an Ainu village here in Karafuto, where Wilk was also born. Karafuto is a troubled place. There are a lot of ethnic minority groups in the area, and Wilk saw his people almost completely wiped out by the time he was a teenager, which led to his friendship with Kiraranke, who was working with a revolutionary group in Russia. Together they helped assassinate the Russian emperor at the time, and then went on the run for the next 10 years until they escaped into Japan, where Wilk would eventually revitalize his plan through his daughter, to strengthen and unite these minority groups so they'd be strong enough to stand up to any bigger nations that might try to erase them and their cultures. It's still a mystery where exactly it all fell apart, what really happened the night the gold was stolen, but honestly, the backstory was so interesting that it was kind of an afterthought to realize I didn't have all the pieces yet. I'm impatient for it now, but I understand why we had to start at the beginning. During their time as revolutionaries, they were working with a woman named Sophia. She didn't come with them to Japan, choosing instead to stay behind and lead the group in Russia, a group that's remained fiercely loyal to her, though they've all been arrested and locked up for some time. That's the outline of this season, plot-wise. Kiraranke's leading them to Akko prison so they can enact another jailbreak and free Sophia, who may be able to tell a Sherpa something about Wilk that'll trigger the right memory. And Sugimoto's group is trailing along after them, trying to catch up. In a lot of ways, this season felt like... filler definitely doesn't feel like the right word, but it was a side trip. A necessary one, but... the pacing in Golden Kamuy has always been kind of interesting. Often it's this peaceful, meandering stroll, and then suddenly it turns into a sprint with no warning. This season was more of a stroll than the past two have been. It felt just a little bit monotonous sometimes. Maybe it was the sensation of retracing a path back and forth across the Karafuto map. It never got so bad that I would say I was bored, but something about this season just didn't flow quite as well as the show has up until this point. But when it did get good, its high points were so high that it's hard to remember anything else, looking back. Let's start with Hijikata, because I feel sort of bad. I had almost nothing to say about him last season, and then he was barely in this one. But the one episode that does follow him stands out as one of my favorites, even though it's kind of a side story at best. Hijikata goes to track down one of the other prisoners, a man even older than him, who he has a history with from his samurai days. This man was once known as Yoichiro the Manslayer, and the families of his victims are still hiring people to track him down and take him out, all these years later. But when Hijikata does find him, he finds a man who knows he's nearing the end. He's mostly senile, and his body started to fail him too, but he comes back to himself a little when he's attacked, though he sees himself and Hijikata the way they were when they were young. The whole style changed during his fight scenes, which would have been cool enough on its own to make this episode stand out, but his death was honestly kind of beautiful too. The sadness in Hijikata's eyes as he looked at Yoichiro said it all. It was a mercy killing, but one that still allowed him to go down fighting, in a way befitting a warrior. I started to notice a theme to the character development in this season. It's like the writing goal was to push everyone as far as they could, show us exactly what it would take to break each of them. I don't think it was just sadness I saw in Hijikata's eyes. I'm sure there was some fear there too. He was looking at what he might become one day, if he survives long enough. And Sugimoto was an obvious one. Being separated from a Sherpa for so long, and under these circumstances, drives him a little crazy, and the new brain damage played a part too. We got a backstory for Tsukishima this season too. In a series full of eccentric personalities, he stood out to me for being so stoic and level-headed. Well, mostly he stood out because I suspected he might not be as loyal to Tsurumi as the men in his unit who lose their heads anytime the lieutenant so much as glances in their direction. And I don't think that anymore. Tsukishima has a very long history with Tsurumi, and while I'm sure he's seen through Tsurumi's manipulative manner for exactly what it is, now he's interesting because he seems to be loyal to him anyway. Tsukishima is a man who's put in a lot of work to be as disciplined as he is. He grew up as the son of the most hated man in a tiny village and soon became known for his own temper and violent ways. His backstory is about as convoluted as they come, but the gist is that he went away to war only to return home to find that the girl he loved, the only person in his hometown who'd ever given him a chance, was dead, that she'd killed herself after his father had started spreading rumors Tsukishima had died in battle. So he, understandably, loses it, beats his father to death, and winds up in jail, which is where Tsurumi comes into the picture. He gets Tsukishima pardoned on the basis that tensions are heating up with Russia, he's about to be sent overseas as a spy, and he needs someone fluent in Russian to accompany him. Which Tsukishima wasn't at the time, but he worked diligently to learn the language after Tsurumi saved his life. But here's the important part. Tsurumi told him the girl wasn't actually dead. Her parents had faked her death and sent her away to an arranged marriage in Tokyo because they didn't like him. But then, years later, he hears from another soldier that what really got him out of jail was that the girl's body had been dug up from underneath his father's house. And when Tsukishima confronts Tsurumi about this, he tells him the original lie was to give him a motivation to keep going. It strengthened Tsukishima's spirit to think she might still be happy, even if he couldn't be with her. But I'm not sure what I believe to be the actual truth. I think it's very possible the truth is the original tale, that she threw herself off the cliff or whatever, thinking he was dead, because the soldier who told him the bones under the house story was definitely working for Tsurumi. I'm not sure what the purpose of that lie was. Maybe just to ensure that Tsukishima would never desert and try to go be with her? That seemed unlikely anyway, in my opinion. I felt like he was very ready to believe she deserved better than him. That one might remain a mystery, I suspect. The important thing here is that this confrontation confirms that Tsukishima knows Tsurumi is willing to lie to get whatever he wants, probably knows he's being manipulated, and chooses to stay anyway. In his defense, Tsurumi's line about how his dad's life wasn't worth Tsukishima's future was pretty persuasive, and I can understand where he's coming from. Tsukishima really doesn't have anything to go back to. He's done a lot with his life, but all of those opportunities came out of this second chance Tsurumi gave him. But back to that point of pushing everyone until they break. This backstory made me really interested to see if the series is maybe setting up that break. Just what would it take to get Tsukishima to leave him? He's come a long way since his youth. He's become a man who prioritizes discipline and control above all else. And there's always something satisfying about watching a character like that snap. Kind of along those lines, we saw very little of Tsurumi in the present day in this season, but the bomb they drop in one of his flashbacks absolutely stole the show. The episode revolves around our revolutionary trio, staying with a photographer who was teaching them Japanese, until the police arrive. Our three immediately go on the offensive, but the police have no idea who they are. They're here for the Japanese spy. In the battle that ensues, the photographer's wife and baby are killed. Accidental collateral damage. The revolutionaries escape, and in the wife's dying moments, the photographer reveals his real name to her, and reveals to the audience that this was Tsurumi all along, during his time as a spy, prior to the scars that make him recognizable now. And I feel like this definitely changes something, I'm just not sure what yet. This could mean a million different things for him. He knew Wilk personally, at least for a little while, long enough to get a read on his character, and so he might understand his motives a little better than I'd thought. There's also the matter of his wife and child. Were they just part of his cover? How much did he actually love them? Will that come back to haunt him in some way that corrupts his motives and changes everything? It was a huge moment, and it's impossible for me to predict what will come of it. The bottom line is, this was another season that felt like it didn't move the greater plot forward too dramatically, but was chock full of some really interesting and important character development. And there's one more person I really want to talk about. Perhaps the only one I can say I feel like I truly understand amidst all these plot twists, but it requires going into the last few episodes, and I think Season 3 is deep enough in to warrant a warning for spoilers, so beware going forward. I really liked Sugimoto's character, but if you saw my review for the last season, it probably won't be a surprise that Ogata's my favorite. There's just such a depth to how twisted he is, in a way that's fascinating, but not exactly mysterious. The more we see him, the more it all comes together. He winds up with a fever in this season after a stakeout in the snow with a Russian sniper, and while he's suffering through a Sherpa's traditional cold treatments, he starts to hallucinate the ghost of his half-brother Yusaku, the legitimate son, adored by everyone around him, and we get a little more insight into what led to that murder. Ogata's been shown to be a sociopath. Pretty plain and simple. He doesn't seem able to comprehend feeling guilty about killing someone, and it's not just that he thinks everyone should feel the way he does. He's convinced himself that everyone is secretly like him. One of my favorite scenes in Season 2 was the one where Sugimoto drops his guard a bit and talks with a Sherpa about the lies soldiers tell themselves to mentally survive war. Ogata took this to another level. The lies he tells himself to reconcile his own mindset with life, and we see him brought to a breaking point as well. We see he actually spent quite a bit of time with his brother while they were in the army together, and all their downtime together was spent trying to corrupt Yusaku in some way, prove that no one was genuinely as pure and good as everyone was convinced he was. And when all his attempts fail, when the end result is Yusaku getting emotional and assuring Ogata he knows he's actually a good person somewhere deep inside too, that's the last straw, and Ogata actually kills him against Tsurumi's orders. But I doubt that's the last we'll see of Yusaku's ghost, because frankly, Ogata lost. Whether he'd admit it or not, Yusaku had the upper hand all the way to the end, and killing him didn't win him that war. If anything, it was an admission of defeat, a way to avoid acknowledging that he'd never win. Yusaku really was just that pure-hearted, a contradiction in Ogata's worldview that he just couldn't live with. And we see it again with a Sherpa at the climax of this season. There are a lot of little moments throughout where Ogata makes an effort to get closer to her and gain her trust. The fact that she's the one who holds the key to finding the gold becomes almost coincidental. He needs to be close to her, because he needs to break her. This girl who's suffered so much and still chooses a path of non-violence whenever she can, she's another one who challenges his view of human nature by being too good. He does everything he can to goad her into attacking him, and then finally snaps when she won't do it, which is when Sugimoto finally catches up, startling her into accidentally releasing that arrow after all. It's a beautiful moment when Sugimoto rushes in to save Ogata, who he'd love to kill himself, just because if it happens this way, she's the one who'll be a murderer. So Ogata survives to see another day, albeit with less depth perception than he had before, and of course immediately stabs them in the back for saving him and escapes. And so everyone else starts the journey back to Hokkaido, where it feels like the real story's about to begin. Like I said, I continued to enjoy this season, but it did feel like a detour in some ways, like we're still setting up all the pieces. I think I will start to get a little impatient if everything doesn't start really coming together towards a conclusion in Season 4, but I'm optimistic and excited to see where we go next. Thank you for watching.